Hi everyone, so we're going to get started on our mini album for Simple Stories, Simple Vintage Ancestry, and I am doing this tutorial as part of my design team commitment with Country Craft Creations. So I'll move this out of the way. I will hopefully put my cutting guide in the description box that's down below. Remember to like and subscribe to this video or to my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And yeah, let's get started on this. So first thing we're going to need is we need 2 pieces of chipboard that measures 7 by 8.5. And we're going to be covering those 2 pieces of chipboard. And I am using the brown artisan cardstock that Tammy sells at Country Craft Creations. So you're going to need 2 of those cut at 9 by 10.5. So let's start with one. And once I get them separated, and just to speed things up, I have already put score tape on the back of my chipboard. Score tape does tend to be my adhesive of choice when I am wrapping chipboard. I know some people use the art glitter glue, but my adhesive of choice is the dry adhesive. Get my spacers that Tammy also sells in the store. So there's a 1 inch across the top and a 1 inch down the side. And then I am going to take my piece of chipboard and I am very carefully going to butt it up against the top spacer and also butt it up against the spacer that I placed on the left hand side of my scoreboard. And I'm just going to move things. I'm going to give it a good burnish, because we all know that's what activates the adhesive. And the reason I like to do full coverage is because then you don't run the risk of having any bubbles on your cover. So bubbles, I mean when your chipboard kind of is not adhered all the way, and then as you're folding you start noticing a bubble, and no one likes those bubbles. So right now what I'm doing is I am folding my artisan cardstock over my chipboard. And because it is artisan, I know I can do this safely and not have to worry about any cracking. If you're using a cardstock other than artisan, I would probably test it before I was quite as heavy-handed as I am being with the artisan. And I'm just going to get a burnishing tool out and just give all of my fold lines a good little burnish in both directions. So we folded our cardstock over our chipboard, and now what I like to do is I like to run some dry adhesive around the outer edge of my cardstock and also around the outer edge of the chipboard. And I am going to use 3/8 score tape and 1/4 inch score tape for this purpose. And again, this is my adhesive of choice. I know some people use the art glitter glue for this application. I just prefer my dry adhesive. So we're just going to, like so. And this is not an exact science, it's just more of, we want to make sure that we have full coverage when we are folding our cardstock over our chipboard. And for the outer edge of the cardstock, I don't go right to the outside edges, just because I see no need to when I'm going to be cutting out the little rectangles that are in the corner. And I'm going to turn. I wonder if you guys can hear my dogs outside. They're playing, and they're quite vocal when they play. Actually, I'm sure some people think that they're not being friendly with each other, but they are. They're just extremely vocal. So now you want to burnish all that score tape. And turn. And turn again. All right, so now we've got that burnished. So what we want to do is we want to cut out the squares that are in each corner. And we created those squares when we folded our cardstock over. So you can see them on this side. So what we want to cut out is this square and then on the other three corners. And so what I like to try and do is when I'm cutting out my squares, I only want to cut up to where the two lines intersect. And if I've cut appropriately, they should almost fall out or only require just a little tug. Something like that is perfect. I'm not always that successful, but that's what I aim for. So there was one. Oh, go from this side again. There was two. And we're getting ready for three. And we're going to do four. Like almost so. So let's get rid of our little squares. They're not triangles, they're squares. And now we want to do a slight miter. So what I've done is I've taken my cardstock and I'm folding it around the edge of the chipboard, keeping it tight, and then I just want to miter this 1-inch tab. So just a slight miter, and then I turn and reverse it the other way. And all we're doing is we're just cutting away some of the bulk, and it just makes for a nicer finished book. And our next corner, and like so. And like so. Let's get rid of all these bits. And so here's what you should be left with after you've mitered all four corners. So now what I want to do is I want to remove the adhesive backing from the dry adhesive I placed on the chipboard. There you go. Sometimes you have to find the right spot to lift it. And then we should be left with something like that. And then what I like to do is I like to work with one edge at a time, or one side at a time. I've got some glue on the tip of my art glitter glue, and I just wanted to get it off before we get started. So I like to work with the two short sides first and then do the two long sides. That is your preference. It just depends on the look you're going for. I always run myself a bead of art glitter glue a lot on the cardstock right up against the edge of the chipboard, and that's just to soften those fibers, because we are asking this paper to do something that, well, yes, paper can fold, but we want this paper to stick, and it's going to be like this for a long time. So if we soften up those fibers, there's just less chance of cracking. And even though it's artisan, I go, let's not tempt fate. So if you do end up with any glue, you can use a baby wipe to wipe it up. And we're going to turn the other way. So I'm still working on a short end. And I'm going to run my bead of art glitter glue, like so. And then I'm going to give it a good burnish, pulling it over. And I use all of my tools when I am doing this. We're going to turn again. Now what I'm working on is I'm working on the two long sides. So we'll remove the backing. And with my burnishing tool, like so. And turn again. And if you do have, remember, any glue that you can see, just wipe it up with a baby wipe and it dries clear. So my burnishing tool has a little grooves on it, and I like to just run it along the edges of my chipboard after I have them covered. You could just use the edge of your bone folder if you wanted to do that. It's whatever works for you. Now, any of you that have followed me know that I really have a dislike for these little burrs that you can sometimes get. And I tend to just take my scissors and I just carefully cut them off. And sometimes you just got to figure out which way is the best. You don't want to cut into that chipboard, you just want to cut the little burr off. So there is one cover completed. And I'm just going to move on and do the hinge piece. And the reason I want to do this is because I need my hinge piece to dry. So the chipboard for the hinge piece is 2.5 by 8.5. And the cardstock that is going to cover that hinge piece is 5.5 by 10.5. And basically what you do is when you're trying to figure out how wide to make your hinge piece that's going to, or your cardstock that's going to cover the hinge piece, my rule of thumb is, so my hinge piece is 2.5. I want a 1.5 and a 1.5 wing on either side. So that's a total of 3. So 2.5, I just add 3 inches to it, gives me 5.5. So I'm just going to lay it on my scoreboard. Again, I'm going to use my spacers. And if you don't have these wonderful spacers from Country Craft Creations, you can always make your own out of chipboard. So this is a 1-inch spacer, and the green one that runs down the side is 1.5 for this application. And again, I have put my dry adhesive on the back. And the only reason I want to get the hinge done is because I like to let it have a few minutes to dry after I've put the liquid glue on it. So I'm kind of just stepping out of sequence here for a minute. Like so. Move my spacers. And again, just like we did for the one cover, we're folding our cardstock over our chipboard, doing the 2 ends first. So I refer to these 2 as the ends because this is going to be the top and the bottom of the book. And then I like to fold the sides. And then I like to fold the other side. And I'm going to get my burnishing tool out and give this all a really good burnish. And again, oops, and again. Now we want to do a little bit more burnishing on this because when we apply the hinge to our cover, our front and back cover, we are going to be adhering this wing like so. So what I want to do is I want to get some real definition here. I want to be able to see where the edge of my chipboard is. And all this does then, when we lay down our cover, we get a very nice fit right tight up against the edge of the spine chipboard. So just take your burnishing tool and burnish right along the edge of the chipboard, keeping in mind whatever cardstock you have used to cover your chipboard, that it can handle that pressure, because you don't want to poke through. That would be the last thing you want to do, because then what happens is you probably will be starting over, or at least starting part of your construction over. Okay, so on the spine, I add dry adhesive to the 2.5 inch side, so at both ends. And that is the only place I am going to add any extra or dry adhesive, because I'm going to do the rest of this with the art glitter glue. So then, just like we did on that cover, we want to cut out the bulk of this rectangle. And this is not, I did not invent, or I did not create this way of wrapping your chipboard. Actually, this is how Tammy wraps hers, and I like it so much that I have continued to use it, because I like the clean look we get of the cover, because I never really liked, with the old method where you had everything on the same piece of cardstock and you then fold it over, I never liked that look of where the spine and the covers met. And I know some people, I'll show you here in a second, prefer, so I'm just going to get rid of these. So some people prefer to have their wings on the outside of their cover. I don't like that look. I still prefer the look of the wings on the inside of the chipboard cover, like so. And it truly is your preference. It has to be what you like and what works for you. I am just showing you what I do and how I like it, but it's not, by far not the only way. So now I'm just going to miter my tabs. And again, it's just to get rid of some bulk. I also will eventually miter my wings. I'm just not going to do that right now because I want to get some adhesive on them first. So I'll just do the top tabs. And like I say, this is just the way I do it. There are 1,000 ways to wrap chipboard. So please feel and do what you are comfortable with. Just going to get out some wider. dry adhesive. So again, I'm just going to get my definition here. And part of this is so I can really see where the edge of it is. And then I'm just going to run, so I'm keeping my dry adhesive back, maybe 1/16, maybe an 1/8. Again, the more you make your covers like this, the more you'll figure out what your comfort zone is. I believe, yes, I can get a 1/4 inch down the center. Now, some people don't use as much adhesive as I do. I like using this much adhesive because this is what's holding the spine to the rest of the book. So let's get some definition on this side. And all I'm doing is I'm just running my burnishing tool right along the edge of the chipboard. I'm going to turn it so I can see what I'm doing without getting my head into the shot. Because I'm sure you don't want to see the top of my head. And along the outside edge. And remember, if you're using a liquid adhesive to do this, you'd want to miter the little wings first. But because I use dry adhesive, I like to add it, burnish, and then miter. So I'm burnishing my adhesive. And now all I'm going to do, so this is my 1 inch tab at the top. I'm just going to take a slight miter just to cut away a little bit of the bulk. And some people don't even do that. Some people leave it all. I just get really concerned about not wanting any hangover. You know, it's like a hangnail. I don't like those either. And again, and turn, last one. Okay, let's get rid of all those little pieces. So this is what you should have. So this is the good side, I'm going to call it. So I put my dry adhesive on the wings of the good side, so those 1.5 inch wings you created. And what I'm going to do right now, we have to flip it over to the bad side, or the inside, because we want to fold over our 1 inch tabs that are at the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to remove that little bit of dry adhesive. I'm going to take my art glitter glue and run a bead right along the chipboard, and then I just like to add adhesive to the 1 inch tab, and I'm pulling it up and pulling it down. And yes, it would not be a project by Bonnie unless this happened. I tend to use too much glue sometimes, and thank goodness it dries clear. That's all I can say. There we go, and we're going to turn, and we're just going to repeat this process on the other end. Like so, then add like so, and then we're just going to fold it over. Give it a good burnish. And then, like I do on the front and back cover, I like to just run. So we are going to now set this aside so that these 1 inch tabs can dry. And that's why I wanted to get it done before I did the second cover piece, so this has its time to dry. Here is our second piece of cardstock that measures 9 by 10.5, and we are using that to cover our piece of chipboard that measured 7 by 8.5. I'm just going to push it up into that left-hand corner, get my spacers, and I did put adhesive on the back. And I did burnish all of this adhesive. And we are going to butt it up against the top spacer and the spacer that's on that left-hand side. Give it a good rub to make sure that it isn't going to move when you lift the spacers out. I like to flip mine over and again give it a good burnish. And I like my wide burnishing tool because it just makes this process go a little quicker. And we are going to fold the cardstock over the chipboard using our hands to fold down the edges. And repeating on the 2 long sides. Like so. And then I'm just going to use my little burnishing tool. Make those. That was a bit of glue on this burnishing tool. It happens. And turn the other way. You just want to be able to see those fold lines, so when you're cutting out the corners, you have a very clear idea of where you want to be cutting. I'm just going to add our dry adhesive on the outer edges of our cardstock. And remember, I am using 3/8. You could use 1/4 inch if you wanted to. You could use the art glitter glue. If you're going to use art glitter glue, of course you'd want to miter or take out the corners and then miter them before applying the art glitter glue. But because I'm using dry adhesive, I do it in this order so that I get side to side coverage. And now I'm taking 1/4 inch and I'm going to run it along the chipboard like so, and like so, and turn. And again, I use this to get good coverage, and so we have the 3/8 along the cardstock and the 1/4 along the chipboard. So when you're folding it over, you get almost edge to edge coverage. You might have maybe 1/8 of an inch where there isn't anything, but that's my reasoning for using the 2 different widths of dry adhesive. Now, if you use art glitter glue to do this, then of course you would have your complete coverage. All right, so we are going to cut out the corners. Just like we did the first time, I'm cutting up to that X, but not through it, hopefully. And you want to make sure that it just falls out the corner. or the square, whatever we would like to call it. And there's another one. And you'll know if you need to cut more because you'll tug on it and it doesn't want to give. So that's the point in time that you go, oh no, it's not ready. And last one. Like so. There we go. Let's get rid of these. Now we want to do some mitering, just like we did on the first one. Wouldn't that be nice if they all landed in that little spot? So there's one corner. Then you could just let them build up there, right? Don't know if that's such a good idea. Since my desk usually looks like a hurricane hit, we'll see how long today I manage to keep it as tidy as it looks right now. And last one. At least I believe it's the last one. I'll know here. Yes. So let me just pick up my bits and get them off my table. And again, this is what you should be left with. So now we're going to start adhering our two short sides. So I'm going to remove my backing from my score tape all around on the chipboard. And then we'll just remove it off of one short end to start with. Hopefully my art glitter glue did not plug, which it didn't, thank goodness, because I left it sitting without its pin in it, which is another thing I'm notorious for doing. All right, so let's give it a good burnish. Excellent. Turn the other way. Remove the backing. Just a small bead. Fold it over. And now we're ready to do the two long sides. Like so. Burnishing tool, pulling it towards the center of the card or the chipboard. Last side. And some more adhesive. And then fold. And then rub the edge of your burnishing tool. If you don't have this type of burnishing tool, you can use your finger, whatever works for you. And so now what we've got is we've got a front cover. So let me get the tip in my glue. So what we've got here is we've got the covers front and back, and we've got the spine piece. And now what we are going to do is we are going to attach one of the covers to each side of the spine piece. And if you've watched me, you know that I tend to use my scoreboard to help me keep things straight and square. And I'm going to just take my burnishing tool, just burnish along the edge of the chipboard on top of the cardstock. Remove my adhesive. And like so. I always angle. I know some people just drag it down. You got to find what works best for you. I may try this drag down method this time because it was one of the other designers. I think it was Anne Marie. I was watching her tutorial for the Journey to the North Pole, and I think that's what she did, and I went, I need to give that a try. And you know what? I quite liked it. Thank you, Anne Marie, for sharing. So there's one. Just make sure we're nice and square, which we are. Actually, I really like that. So if you've never tried that, I would strongly suggest giving that a shot or a try. Backing. So now I'm getting ready to adhere the other cover, and again I'm going to use that same idea. Oh, I really like that. And turn it. Make sure that everything is nice and square, which it is. And there is our cover on, or the cover of our album. That's going, I really like that, just pulling it off to the side. So now what we need to do is we need to cover this spine area, because I always go like this to say our book or our album is still too wobbly. And once we add our reinforcement spine piece, or our spine reinforcement piece, it will give stability to the spine area. And I cut my spine reinforcement piece to 8 by 8.5 less a 16th. So when I'm talking less a 16th, I want you to just back it up to that line that is right after the 8.5. That is a 16th less than an 8.5. So we need to put some adhesive on the back of this piece of cardstock. And again, some people will use the, you know what I'm going to do today? I am going to do the outer edges in 3/8 because I seem to be having trouble on this brown paper seeing the edge. And it doesn't matter so much on the sides, but it will matter on the top and bottom. So, getting out my white piece of paper. Yes, that is much better. And if you follow me, you know that I like to lay a white piece of paper behind my work because I sometimes struggle with seeing the edge of my paper. Now I'm going to use my bigger. So I just want to check something here. Yes. So what I want to do is, let me get the book back in. Because my spine reinforcement page is going to lay this way, I am going to run my adhesive horizontally. So what I'm doing is I'm running it along the 8-inch side. So with my 8-inch across the top of my scoreboard, that's how I'm putting on this adhesive. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because it's just another, how am I going to say it? It's just another prevention so that nothing will lift up. And I know I'm not being very neat about putting this adhesive on today, but because I have side-to-side coverage on the edges, this is not as critical. And I seem to be putting it on an angle today, which is fine. Such is life. It is what it is. And this will be just fine. So not the neatest score tape that I've ever put down, but it will serve the purpose. So we want to give it a good burnish. There we go. We're going to remove all the backing from this score tape. And this edge, I'm just going to turn it so I'm not sitting with my hand on top of the adhesive. There we go. All right, so let's get the book back in here. And what I want to make sure is that I've got it facing, and if you have anything hanging over your edges, this is a good time to get rid of it. And because we did run that 3/8 around the outer edges, that helps prevent so much of that hangover that I talk about. So my head may get into this shot. If it does, I'm going to apologize now. Now remember, we only have a 1/16 of an inch. So if you're a little concerned about that, then I would cut your paper back to that. Instead of making it 8.5 less a 1/16, I would probably make it 7 7/8. And again, that's your personal preference. That's why we dry fit, just so we don't have anything hanging over. I just prefer the look of this. So now we're going to take our burnishing tool, and I'm going to use this burnishing tool because it lets me get, oops, what's going on here? Yeah, we need to get right in there. So you want to make sure that you're giving it a very good burnish. Need to burnish it some more. So I'll try and show you on the other side. There we go. I'm liking it more. And I've got this burnishing tool that I often use. And again, you've got to use what works for you. So the only thing I'm noticing about pulling my cover chipboard over the edge of my spine is you need to work a little bit more on getting a good definition between the spine and the cover. And it could have been the way I did it. So let's burnish this one. Turn it around. And as I always say at this point, the extra time you take here is what makes your book look like something that was professionally made versus looking like something that somebody just threw together. And this little bit of extra time is what's so important here. And that is exactly what I wanted. So there is the cover of our album made and ready to go. All right, so now we're going to move on to our spine and making our hinges. But before we do that, what I would like to do is I would like to add our cardstock that is going to cover our spine area, because I like to put that down first, then I like to put my hinge on top of it. And I'm trying to decide, do I want that side or do I want this side? And I think it's going to be this side. So we're going to get out my brown ink. Because again, those of you that know me know I tend to go for this brown sepia ink. You can choose not to ink the edges of your pattern paper. It again is a personal choice. I tend to ink on dark paper. I tend not to ink on light paper because I tend to make a mess sometimes. So we're just going to add our adhesive. Like so. And remember, it is the same width as your spine, so it was 2.5 inches wide by 8 3/8, I believe. I'll just double check that in a second, but I'm pretty sure. I just want to make sure my book is going to close. Yes. And then we're going to set the cover aside. Just want to make sure. Yes, yes. There we are. So I'm just going to show you guys something. I don't know if you guys can see. There's a very faint line of glue right there. There, I think you can see it now. And I have this little glue adhesive thing that I discovered if you do it not too long after the glue's been put there, you sometimes can get rid of most of it. Like, I got rid of a little bit of it. You probably can still see it. But it's just another one of my little OCD things that I found a cure for. Okay, let's set the book aside and let's get our hinge piece pulled out. I'm going to move my white paper since I don't need it right now, and I want to give you the measurement for the hinge piece. So the hinge piece is going to measure 5 7/8 by 8. Because I am making my hinge a 1/2 inch shorter than my book, but I'm also making my hinge the same size as my pages are going to be. So I'm going to remove my little sticker, clean up some of my mess, shock of shocks, leave all this stuff out for now because we're going to need most of it again. Going to get my score tool. It's hiding on me. So I like to have a 1/2 inch hinge, but a 5/8 inch gusset. So my scoring is as follows, because we're making 4 pages, so that means we're going to have 3 gussets. I'm scoring at 1/2 inch, 1, so that's your first hinge. Then I'm scoring at 1 5/8, so that creates your gusset. Then I'm scoring at 2 1/8 and 2 5/8, which makes your next hinge. Then I score at 3 1/4, so 3 1/4 to give me my gusset, so that's my second gusset. Then I'm scoring at 3 3/4 and 4 1/4, so there is my third hinge. And then I need my third gusset, which is going to be 4 7/8, so that's 1 mark back from the 5. And then I'm scoring at 5 3/8, which gives me my last hinge. So we're going to do some folding and burnishing. And I think I've said this before. I know my cardstock, so I know I can give it a good burnish. And usually what I do is I start by only folding my hinges. Some people do it a different way, but this is what I like to do. So just to let you see, so I folded my first hinge, then I found my second hinge and I folded it. Now I'm going to find my third hinge, which is these 2 1/2 inch score or spaces, and this is the score line I want to fold on. So it's the score line, it's this score line right here that is between these 2 1/2 inches. So you got your 5/8 gussets, and then you've got your 2 1/2 inches that make your hinge. So I'm folding on the center of that, making sure that everything is staying square. And what I mean by square is that my paper is square after each fold. And I always like to fold back on the paper. So in this case, instead of folding this way where I'd be folding just the hinge up, I'm folding with all of the paper. And it just gives me a crisper fold. I like to keep my score tool straight up and down so we have no overhang. So now, again, because I like to use the dry adhesive for this application, and again, it is a preference, so I'm starting with one end or the other. I'm laying down my 3/8 dry adhesive, making sure it goes side to side. And once I get this ripped off, I'll show you something else. I like to make sure that I've laid down my adhesive so it's closest to the gusset, so that when I fold over my hinge, I have solid coverage at the bottom of my hinge by the gusset. So I hope that's making sense. And then we just continue on. So there's my next gusset. So I want to make sure that my score tape is right along the edge of that score line that formed the one side of the gusset. So there's my second hinge with some score tape on it. And now I'm doing my third one, like so. And then I am going to do my last one. And my last one, I'm just using the edge of my cardstock and adding my adhesive. So again, we're going to do some burnishing. All right, so I'm going to get my little pick. And I'm going to take all of my cardstock and fold it over on itself and give it a good burnish. And this is where I'm now going to create my hinge. So I'm going to fold it up back on itself. So it's standing up like this. So my hinge does not have a little wing on it. It doesn't have a little tab. Again, this is not my method of making a hinge. This comes from Tammy at Country Craft Creations, but I like the clean look it leaves me. So I have learned to also make my hinge mechanism using that same method. And again, I'm folding my cardstock over on itself, making sure everything is nice and straight. Then using my burnishing tool, and once I have it burnished, then I'm going to fold up the other side of the gusset. And now I have two hinges with one gusset between them. So let's do the next one. Remove my backing. And again, I'm folding over onto that adhesive, so it's 1/2 inch to 1/2 inch. That's the only thing you have to remember. Don't fold your 5/8 over onto, because it won't fit. So here's what you have. And then we're going to do our last hinge. I'm just going to turn it around, folding it over onto itself. And then I want to stand it up. And I want to make sure that my hinges can go to, that would be the left if I had it facing left to right. Give them a good burnish and then fold them to the right. And repeat. Stand them back up again. And then I always like to just get it in my score tool and just see where I am, see if it's nice and straight, and it is. So this hinge is about 1 7/8 inches wide, because remember I have 5/8 of an inch as my gussets. So let's pull the book back in here. And all I want to do is I want to see how it's going to fit. Now today my plan is to put my hinge closer to the bottom of my book than to the top of the book, because my pages I'm making have a top loading pocket, and I want to make sure that they're not hanging out over the top of the book. So if I'm happy with everything I'm seeing, so what I'm trying to do is keep my left to right spacing about the same. Yes, I'm going to use my ruler just because that's what I have to do. And then just bring it over to this side. See. So I'm probably gonna just shuffle just a little bit. And I think I'm too far over. I think I like it there. So I'm just going to take my pencil, draw myself some lines that are going to become my guides as I put down my hinge. And at the bottom. And then I'm going to move the book. I'm going to add some adhesive to the back. So some people, again, like doing this with the liquid glue. I prefer the dry adhesive. And again, I'll say it. It is a choice. I'm going to use, I believe, my 5/8 once I find where I set my, no, actually I'm going to use my 1/2 because my gussets are 5/8. That's right. So I'm just running this adhesive down the center of the back side of the gusset. So it's not the side that the hinges are on. It is the back of it. And there's two. And we'll get ready for one more. Like so. Give it a good burnish. Get the book back over here. Stand everything up. And again, just try to dry fit to make sure you're going to be happy with everything you're seeing. And I believe I am. So I like to just remove a bit of this adhesive to start with. And again, it's just to give me a little bit of wiggle room as I am adding this to my book. So start at the bottom because that's where I drew my line. Find my side. Find my side. Make sure I'm happy. And then we want to just see, yes, and almost yes. Sorry if my head is in the way. And all I'm doing is I'm tacking down the very top of it. And this is what's going to allow me to get my finger or my tweezers, because I see that I don't have it out as far. Oh, that's because it flipped back up. I wondered where it had gone. We'll make this work. There we go. And now we got to get the one. Yes, it did fold down. Excellent. Okay, so now we've got that. Just want to make sure that nothing has moved, and it hasn't. We want to make sure that we have this one. So I've taken the tape off the middle. And now I'm just going to carefully, I just want to lift it. Come on. Lift up. Now because this is artisan, I know I can do this. Just want to see, am I going to be happy? If not, I'm going to pull the undo out. Yes, I will be happy. So we can lay that one down, lay this one down, give it a good burnish. Still happy. I like to always fold in my two outside 1/2 inch hinges and just see, am I happy with how much space I have on either side? I'm a little short on this side, but I can live with it. All right, so there are our hinges in our album. Like so. Okay, so the next thing we're going to start doing is making our pages. And because these pages are going to be bigger than 6, we have a 2-part page system that we're going to use here. So let's move the book out of our way. So what I did, let me get the paper clip off of my work. What I did is I labeled my pages A and B. So you have 4 of each. So page A, or base page A, is 6.5 by 8. We're not doing any scoring on that base page. But base page B measures 7 by 8, and we need to score each one of them with a 7-inch along the top of the scoreboard at 1/2. So I have already scored mine. So I'm going to fold on my score lines. clean up my space again. I'm going to burnish on my score line, and I'm going to repeat this 4 times. And the last one. And that noise, if you can hear it, is my heating system turning on, because my desk is right below where that heat comes out of, I guess is how I want to say it. So burnish them all well. And then I want to miter those 1/2 inch tabs ever so slightly. And I'm repeating that on all 4 tabs. Last one. There we go. All right. So let's give them another burnish, because I always find after you miter the tabs, you kind of have to remind that paper, oh yes, that's how I wanted it to fold. Okay, so they are finished. So now we're going to bring in that base page A. So I'm going to need 1 base page A and 1 base page B. And how I like to create my next step, or my pages, is I like to make my pages not in the book. So for this application, I am going to attach base page A to base page B, with base page B on top. So my 1/2 inch tab is going to be to the right hand side, and it's going to be on top of base page A. Something like this. And I just like to dry fit to make sure everything is going to be nice and square. I want to make sure that the 2 pages butt up against each other nicely, nothing hanging over the top or the bottom. Going to add my adhesive, so I was happy with that. Going to add my adhesive. And then I'm going to attach A to B, and I'm just going to first attach the corners, making sure that everything is nice and square, because this is the time you've got a second or 2 of wiggle room. And when I'm happy, then I'm going to adhere it down in the center, open it up, and what you should be left with is, so this is base page B, and this is base page A, and your 1/2 inch tab is on the right hand side. Give it a nice burnish. I believe I'm going to be happy. If you happen to be just slightly out like I am there, you can still make this paper work with you. Yes, I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to put my base page that's completed over here so it's out of my way. I'm getting another base page A. I'm getting another base page B. I'm going to dry fit with base page B on top of base page A. And I'm happy there. I'm happy with it all. So I'm just going to turn it over. And here we go. And again, I'm just going to attach or lay it down, not moving it around that much, mind you. And this is where I love the liquid glue, is because it gives you some wiggle room. Gives you some room to look at all sides. And I'm not liking that, so I'm just going to lift it because I still have time. There we go. That's what I wanted. Give it a good burnish. Open it up. If there's any glue, get rid of it. So again, base page B is now adhered to base page A. Everything looks nice and square, adding it to my completed pile. And we have 2 more to do. Base page B on top of base page A. Making sure. Yes. So now we want to put our adhesive on the 1/2" tab. Try not to be too heavy-handed with my glue, but it doesn't always work like that. I'm going to adhere one side, then the other, lifting it up, making sure I'm going to be happy once it adheres. Take a little higher on this side. Lift it up. You want the base page A to just go to the edge, not hanging over. And I am happy with that, so let's give it a good burnish. Open, burnish. There's 3, and we're going to do the last one. So again, a little dry fit. And I am happy. So let's get our adhesive on our tab. Line it up with the top of the page, bottom of the page, then lift it up. No, we're up too high, so, and that's why I like to do just the ends or the corners first, because it gives you that time to move it around if you need to. There we go. And I'm happy. Open it up because you don't want it sticking closed. If you've got any glue that's sort of made its way out from underneath the 1/2" tab. And then let's give them all a really good burnish. Just like so. And like so. Bring our book back in, and I always like to start at the back of my book. So the one thing you want to make sure is you want to make sure that all of your pages that you've put together are facing the same way. So I like to have the base page B that had the 1/2" tab on it on the top. So I'm just going to double check that all of my pages are like that, and they appear to be. And it's a preference thing for me, so you could decide to do it the complete opposite. I just like my finished edge to be what I see first, and then if I see my, as I turn the page, oh yeah, that was attached, I'm okay with that. So we're going to just lay down our first base page, making sure that we're not hanging over. We need to move it down just a little bit because remember, our hinge and our base page are exactly the same height. They're both 8 inches. And I want to fold it like so. I am going to be happy. And I'm going to bring back out that white piece of paper. And I use the piece of paper for 2 reasons. 1, it lets me see what I'm doing. And 2, if I have any glue issues, meaning any glue that leaks out, I have something for it to be collected by. So I'm just going to turn. I'm keeping everything in its place, getting my liquid adhesive, and again, I do like using the liquid adhesive for this application. I'm keeping it closer to the top than to the bottom. That also helps with not having glue that creates a mess on you. Whoops, I just moved something, so let's get it straight again. I believe, nope, I just want it down just a hair. And it only bugs me, it doesn't bug anybody else. There we go. So wipe the glue up, give it a really good burnish. Not a really good burnish, how about a light burnish to start with, because I want to be able to make sure that I'm not binding. So I don't want my base page to catch as I'm turning it. And if I'm happy with that it's not binding any place, then I will finish my burnishing. I'm going to turn it this way and give it a burnish this side. There we go. So there's the first part of base page in. So I'm running a bead of glue along the bottom of my base page. Then I'm going to run adhesive on the hinge again. And then all I'm doing is I'm folding it over onto itself, making sure I'm happy. And I'm going to check again. Everything folds nice. That makes me very happy. And I always like to make sure that I take a quick wipe of my burnishing tool because sometimes glue does get on it. And there is that. In this case, it's the last base page, but it's the first one we put in the book. So just move my white sheet of paper again, get my second base page. So what I want to do first is I want to line it up to the right hand side. So I am using my first base page as my guide. Then I'm getting my second base page lined up, making sure that my edge here is in line with the first base page. I hope that makes sense. I'm happy. Keep everything where it is. Yeah. And now we want to open this up more so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to run a bead of glue. Like so. Fold the hinge over onto the base page. Keeping an eye out for any glue issues. Just give it a burnish, a slight burnish, so it's tacked. And if something like that has happened, you get to wipe up the glue. And we want to make sure that everything's going to fold. It is. And now we can give it a really good burnish. There we go. And again, we're just going to repeat what we did for the first one. Yeah. So we're going to run a bead of glue right along the bottom. Okay, folding over. And I think I'm happy. Give me 1 second. Yes, I am. Okay, so just rub it ever so slightly. Turn it to make sure it's not going to be causing a problem. And making sure we're happy with everything we're seeing. And I am. So there's 2 pages, base pages in our book. Let's work on number 3. So we're just going to repeat our process, what we have done. So just kind of bring it to the edge of the hinge, making sure that we're happy. I believe I will be happy with that. Open up, fold the hinge back so you have room to work and get the glue on it. There we go. And folding it over on, so we fold the hinge over onto the base page. Just tack it down to start with. And we want to turn it, collect any glue. And we did have a huge mess here. That's why you check each time, because what you'd hate to have happen is that a page has stuck to the gusset and you find it after everything has dried. And you want to make sure that you're constantly checking to make sure nothing is getting in the way of the page folding. And that looks good too. So all I was checking here was I folded my base page in on itself so that it's now lined up with the hinge again. And I'm folding the whole mechanism to make sure, nope, nothing was catching, nothing was impeding it or binding. So I'm going to add some glue along the very, very edge of my base page. Now I'm running some glue along the hinge. And then I'm going to fold that base page over onto itself. Have glue on a finger. Obviously it wasn't the finger I thought it was. Okay, now we're going to burnish. And turn your page. Still happy, so we can finish our burnishing. Looking good. We're down to the last one. So dry fit to start with. Happy. Excellent. So open it up, holding it in place. There we go. Turn. Everything is turning nicely. Keeps me happy. I was using glitter the other day and I'm still cleaning up glitter. So if you see any green little flecks, that's what it would be from, the glitter I was using. Okay, and now we're going to put it on the hinge itself. Folding over our base page onto itself. Still liking what I'm seeing. Give it a little tack down. Turn. Still happy. And that is what I like about this method of placing your base pages on your hinges, is your book is still laying flat. I love this method. I don't have the problem of my pages being upside down when I put them in the book and then getting ready to cry because now how do I fix it? I've decorated it once my pages are in the book, the only thing I have to remember is which way is up. And after you get 1 or 2 flaps on, you've got it under control. So now we have 4 pages in our album. Now we've got the mats that are going to go into the top loading pockets that we created when we folded over our pages. And I've cut 4 that measure 5 3/4 by 8. And the reason they're 8 is, remember, we closed up the bottom. So I just want to round the corners of my base pages. And I am going to use my 1/4 inch crocodile corner chopper to round those corners. And again, it is a choice to round corners. There isn't a right way, there isn't a wrong way. You can do it, you don't need to do it. Some of the reasons I do round my corners is because I find they don't get as dog-eared as when I don't. But again, personal choice. And these mats are big enough for a 4x6 or 2 4x6s if you cut them down. Again, gets to be just a personal preference. So let's stick one in each of our pockets. So there's one. And the reason I wanted mats in my pockets is because this album's probably going to have a lot of pictures in it, because the paper I've chosen to decorate it with is the new Simple Stories Ancestry, Simple Vintage Ancestry, I think is what it's called. And sometimes you've got those old pictures and you need those bigger photo mats. So they don't stick out over the top, which was the look I was going for, but I can see them so I can pull them out. All right, so let's move on to our flips and flaps. So we want to do our flips and flaps for the front of page 1. And I'll give you the measurements. So let's just move our book. So we have 2 flaps that measure 6 3/4 by 8. So we're going to, on the 6 3/4 side, score at 1/2. Once my hand can get a hold of them. There we go. And get my scoreboard straight again. We're going to fold on the score line, so I'm folding away from myself, letting the paper work and fold. Just keep the score line straight. Do number 2, burnishing those score lines. Then I'm going to miter my 1/2 inch tabs, because this page is going from the top to the bottom. Repeat on the second one. Okay. Burnish those 1/2 inch tabs again. And I do want to round my corners on these flaps. So I'll do that now because it's just easier than once they are in the book. Okay, let's get the book back in here. So what we're going to do with these tabs, or flaps, is one flap is going to be on the left-hand side, and the other flap is going to be on the right-hand side. And I do plan to use a magnet to keep this closed. So I'm going to start with the flap that is on the left-hand side. You want to make sure that we have it in far enough that it's not going to cause a problem when you turn the book. You want to also dry fit, so I think I'm just going to remove my photo mats that I put in those top load pockets for right now, just so they're not in my way, just so I don't get any extra glue on them. Going to bring my white piece of paper in to help make it a little easier for me to see top to bottom. And what I want to do with this dry fit is just make sure that I'm not hanging over either at the top or the bottom of the page, and I am not, and I'm happy with how that looks. So I'm just folding out my 1/2-inch tab. And just double check again that everything looks good. It does. Fold my tab back over. Whoops, don't move it too much, or you won't be straight anymore. And I just want to turn my page first. I'm happy. Going to do some burnishing. Going to open it up and burnish. And the only reason I miter those little 1/2-inch tabs is because I don't want anything overhanging on the base page. So that one looks good. So now we're going to add the second one, and the second one goes on the left-hand side, right at the edge of the page. And again, what we're checking for is to make sure we don't have any overhang. We're checking that when we have it closed, we're happy. I need to straighten it here for some reason. Let's do that again. Okay, I'm good, except I moved it again. So let's just add the adhesive because we know it's going to fit, since it seems to want to be slipping and sliding around today. There we go. So we're just going to turn it in. I'm going to line it up again. Tack it at both corners. I might have to turn my book. I'm going to turn my book this way so that I can see exactly what it is I'm doing. Making sure. So it's kind of like the way we made the page. You want to make sure nothing is hanging over. But you also want to make sure that it's nice and straight. Which it is. Open it up. Burnish. Close it and burnish. And we're still liking everything I'm seeing. I'm just going to check in my sample one. Yes. So I used a large magnet to hold this shut. So we're going to need a positive and a negative. One of the magnets to the center of the base page. So we're going to put that one down first, because right now we have no other magnets in the book. So we don't have to be worried about which way our magnets are going, meaning positive and negative. And if you follow me, you know that I don't like it when my magnets are conflicting with magnets on another page. So I'm going to lay down some 1/4 inch or whatever adhesive you want to lay down, except for liquid glue, of course, because that would just be a mess. And I'm just going to, so I'm not closing my right flap over it, I'm only closing the left flap. And do it like so. Add your tape. Like so. And that is all we're doing to the front of page 1. Just simple. One flap going to the left, one flap going to the right. I'm going to turn my instructions so I have the back of page 1 to look at. So we're just going to turn it, and again, nothing is impeding with the turning of the page. And on the back of page 1, we are having like a zigzag flap that goes out from the middle of the page. So I'll show you the pieces, give you the measurements, and then we'll talk about what it's doing. So I'm just going to turn the book and set it there. So we need 3 pieces of cardstock that measure 4 1/4 by 6 3/4, and on the 6 3/4 inch side, you are going to score at 1/2. Okay, so we want to burnish on those score lines. And we'll just do the last one, just checking on something else. Let's burnish that last piece of cardstock. All right, so you can choose to miter all 3 of them or miter just 2 of them. And the reason I'm choosing not to miter one of them is that is going to be the one that I'm adhering to the base page. And because it's going to be in the middle of the page, it does not need to be mitered. But again, if it's easier for you to miter them all, then please do so. So basically what we're doing, so this is the base that's going to adhere, get the book back in here. So this is going to adhere to the base page, something like this, so that first flap. Then flap number 2 is going to adhere to the right-hand side of the bottom flap, flap 3 to the left-hand side of the second flap. So I'm just going to move the book out of the way and explain that again. So here's the flap that's going to adhere to the book itself. This is the side that has the 1/2 inch tab. This side does not. You're going to take one of your remaining flaps and with the 1/2 inch tab on the right hand side, adhere that to the flap that I just talked about. Okay, so let's do that one. And let's just do a little quick dry fit here to make sure that I cut correctly, because it would be easier to fix it now, and I did. So we're just going to add our adhesive, and I find it's easier to assemble this mechanism before I attach it to the book. So just like so, without the glue mess happening. I wonder if I am the only person this happens to, or if this is just part of liquid glue. It's probably the only thing I'm not fussy about, is the fact that I'm always cleaning up glue. And I say, I will not use so much glue. I will not use so much glue. And the next thing I know, I've got glue everywhere. So, again, I will talk about the mechanism. The 1/2 inch flap is on your left-hand side. You've attached one of the other flaps to the right-hand side of that first one. Now, the last flap you have with the 1/2 inch tab on your left-hand side, you are going to attach it to the top of the flap that you just glued down. I hope this is making sense. So I'm just dry fitting, and I'm happy. Get some adhesive on here. So we are going to, and if you wanted to, you could have more than just 3 flaps attached together. Really, it's pretty much your choice. I'm just making sure that everything is straight, and I'm happy. So I'm going to do this. And I'm just going to make sure that if there's any glue, taking care of it, give it a good burnish. And I see I might be off just a little bit, so I'm hoping I can fix it just by kind of reburnishing my line, which I can. So I plan to round only, so let's get the book back in here. So this whole mechanism is going to sit in the middle of the back of page 1, but I only want to round the corners of the very top flap, like so. And then I am going to adhere this into my book. I'm going to center it sort of top to bottom. You could, if you wanted to, offset it, but I plan to center mine. I'm happy with that. And what I was checking as I had this in here, I have lots of room on this side, so I know nothing is going to get into the way of my gusset or the turning of the page. Okay, so the only thing we want to make sure right now is that we don't, I'm right at the edge of the page on the left-hand side, but I am not over the page on the left-hand side. And if I'm happy, I'm going to do burnishing, and then open it and burnish it some more. Get my handy burnishing tool in here. There we go. So what we're going to need here is another large set of magnets. Now this album does use a fair amount of magnets, but you could reduce your magnet use by using some seam binding to tie things closed. It's about a thumb's width in, and I'm putting it on the inside of that front flap, the top flap of that flip flap mechanism we created. Okay, I'm going to be happy with that. So now we're just going to let those two attract to each other. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay down my flip flap and let that magnet grab the base page. There we are, and we're going to put some adhesive over the top of it so we don't have to worry about a magnet shifting. Never had it happen, but I would like it not to happen. And that is, once I get this tape on here, the back of page 2. Okay, so we're going to move on to the front of page 2. We have 2 flaps that we need to cut from the cardstock. And the first flap measures 5 by 8, and on the 5-inch side you're going to score at 1/2. The second flap we need for this page measures 6 by 8, and on the 6-inch side you are going to score at 1/2. So we're going to fold on our score lines, miter, or pardon me, burnish I should say. I'm going to do both of that to start with. Take our scissors and miter the 1/2-inch tabs. Just want to make a little note here, so I correct this before I add it to this tutorial. Okay, so let's burnish again on those score lines. And we're going to round our corners. So we're going to round the corners that on both of the tabs, or flaps I should say. So, and like so. Now, this is where you can either choose to adhere one flap at a time, or you could adhere your two flaps together and then adhere them into the book. And I today think I am going to do mine. I'm going to adhere. So this is the larger of the two flaps. So the flap that was 6 by 8 is on the bottom, and then we're adhering the 5 by 8 flap to the top. So now it's 4.5 by 8 because we folded over the 1/2 inch tab. So I'm going to add my adhesive. And line it up so that it's not going to hang over. Making sure that everything is nice and square, not like that. That's not going to be square. There we go. Looking much better. Okay, open. Give it a good burnish. Fold again. Wipe up any glue. There we go. Excellent. Now bring your book in, and I'm going to turn my book. So here's the top of my book. I'm going to turn it so that the right hand side of my book is now facing me, and I want to attach these two flaps to that right hand side of the base page. So I'm doing a little dry fit here to make sure I'm happy, which I am. So let's add the adhesive to that tab. And I like to do the two edges first, or the two sides. While it's kind of sticking, I'm just going to lift it up and take a look and say, am I happy? Well, almost. It's not quite as far over as I would like it to be, so just got to play with it. There we go. Now I'm happy. Okay. Looks good. Open. Burnish. And again, this is a place where if you didn't want to use a magnet to keep it closed, you could choose to tie a ribbon. So you attach the ribbon on this flap and then attach the other half of the ribbon to the seam binding. I'm choosing again to use a large magnet. So here is a case where I want to make sure that my magnets are not going to attract together. So what I want to do is make sure that the magnet I put on this top flap will not attract to this magnet when I have it closed. So in my particular case, it is a plus to a plus. So I want to make sure that I have my minus over here. And you'll have to just play with it to figure it out in your own book, because not all magnets actually read the same, if that makes any sense. So what I'm doing is I'm sort of putting it in a good thumb width, and I'm keeping it to the center of the page. I'm just going to test out my theory before I go too far. So my magnets are not attracting, which makes me happy. Remember, I had to remove this magnet because if you left it on, no, it still wouldn't attract. Okay, I just was double checking something. So I'm going to put that magnet here, remove the backing, and fold this mechanism over on itself. And then I'm going to use some score tape And I find if I don't do magnets now, or make myself some kind of a note to use a magnet, that I end up getting my pattern paper down and nothing to hold my pages shut. All right, we are now to the back of page 2. And the back of page 2 is a pocket and a flap. All right, so let's get my paper clip off of it and give you guys some measurements. So for the back of page 2, I have a pocket, and my pocket measures 5.5 by 7.5, and I just shaved a little bit off of it, so like a 1/16 off of it. And then for my scoring, on the 5.5 inch side, I scored it 1/2. Then I turned it to the 7.5 inch side and I scored it 1/2. I turned it completely around, still on the 7.5 inch side, and I scored it at 1/2 again. So let's fold on those score lines. And let's burnish on those score lines. See here. Okay, so we've got everything burnished, scored. So now we've got to do some mitering and some cutting. I want to cut the bulk out of my corners or my pockets. So down here where the two X's crossed each other, I'm just going to cut right through those two, that X. And then I'm going to repeat it on the other corner. And then I'm just mitering the top of my pocket, just a 1/2 inch tab at the top of my pocket, like so. There we go. And then we want to fold again on those score lines. Give the pocket another good burnish. Bring the book back in. And the pocket is going to the bottom of the back of page 2. And we want to make sure that we're not going to be causing a problem when we turn the page. And I'm not, so I'm happy. So if you follow me, you know that I usually only add adhesive to the bottom tab to start with. And I'm making sure that I've got it right over as far to the left-hand side of that base page as possible. Making sure that I'm square, that I'm not over the page. And once I'm happy, there we go. I'm going to lift it up. Give it a good burnish, making sure if I have any glue that's in any spot I don't want it to be, that I'm getting rid of that glue. And I like to take some Scotch tape, cello tape, whatever you happen to call this stuff, and I like to lay it over that 1/2 inch tab so that when I put my photo mats in here, they slide in and out without catching on that tab. And I'm just going to burnish things just a little bit. Yes. Okay, so we're going to add some adhesive to the 1/2 inch tabs on the left and right hand side of the pocket. And then fold it up, slightly burnish, or lightly, I guess, not slightly, lightly. I'm want to turn my page to make sure everything's going to be okay, and if it is, then I'm going to give it a really good burnish. Excellent. Like I say, just a little extra time you take burnishing now, you end up with a more professional looking project. Just going to hold the two corners of the pocket just for a second because it feels it wasn't quite sticking, and it could be just I didn't get quite enough glue. I might have to go back and just add a little. I think it's going to be fine now. So the next piece for the back of page 2 is a flap that measures 5 by 6 3/4, and on the 6 3/4 inch side I scored at 1/2. So with the 6 3/4 inch side in the top of the scoreboard, I scored at 1/2. I am going to fold on that score line, burnish on that score line. I do not need to miter my 1/2 inch tabs because it's going in the center of the page and it doesn't go side to side. But I am going to round my corners before I put it in the book. Like so. And then I'm just going to eyeball it. So there's no measurement unless you want to measure. That is your choice. I am just going to, like I say, eyeball. Making sure my head's not in the shot, and if it is, I apologize. Let's lift this up because, yes, I used too much glue. There we go. Go. And wipe up any excess glue. Flip it open. Let's do the same thing here. There we go. Give it a good burnish. Now, on this particular flap, I am going to use 2 small magnets. You could use 1 large magnet, but I decided to use 2 small ones instead because I just kind of like that look, because it'll hold down the corners a little bit better. But again, you could also do this with seam binding. You know what? You could probably get away without. Well, no, because of what's going on the opposite page. So I'm going to say no. We still want something to secure this page. All right, so to start with, I want to find out what is holding down the front of page 2. And I have, because it happens to be the X side of these magnets. So I am going to adhere my X side to my top of my flap. I'm just going to turn the whole book around. Remove the backing off of one of these sets of magnets. So I'm just taking the one side off first. And what I'm going to do here is I'm kind of going to go in about a thumb and over about a thumb. And then I'm just going to repeat that with this other magnet. So about there. Yes. So now I can turn the book around, take the backing. Let's do this. Oh, let's move these magnets. Let's add a little bit of dry adhesive to them so they don't shift. Remove the backing. And like so. And like I say, I just like the two magnets here because it holds down each corner. And I have some photo mats to go into this pocket, and the photo mats measure 5 1/4 by 7 1/4, and I am going to round the corners. There we go. And our photo mats can go in our pocket, and they slid in very nicely because I did not have anything binding at the bottom because of the tape. So we are going to move on to the front of page 3, and the front of page 3 consists of a shallow pocket at the top and a small gatefold at the bottom. Now we are going to cut several pieces for this. So the first thing we're going to worry about is we're going to worry about the gatefold that I talked about that's going to sit here at the bottom of the page. And the reason I want to do that first is because once the gatefold is in place, you'll know exactly where you want to put the shallow pocket. So this gatefold consists of 2 pieces of paper, or cardstock I should say, that measure 3 1/4 by 3 3/4. So I'll just say that again. It's 3 1/4 by 3 3/4, and on the 3 3/4 inch side I scored at 1/2 on both of them. And then I also made a small 2 1/4 by 2 1/4, and this is what's going to hold that gatefold shut. So we're going to round some corners. So I'm going to round the corners on my 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. I am going to fold on my score lines on my 3 1/4 by 3 3/4 flaps. I'm going to miter them. So I'm going to miter the little 1/2 inch tabs. Just making myself a note, because I didn't tell you in my instructions to do this. All right, let's get this all out of the way. Okay, now let's bring the book back in. I believe I'm going to want to round my corners. Just going to double check to make sure I don't need to trim anything. I should be okay. I think I will round my corners after I have these little tabs in the book, and I'll explain why in a second. So the first tab I'm going to put in the book is the one that goes on the right side of the book. So you're hearing these tabs at the bottom of the base page, like so. So this is the bottom of the base page. This is the right-hand side of the base page. So let's get some adhesive on the tab. up, making sure it's not hanging over the bottom of the book or hanging over that right-hand side of the book, which it's not. And my burnishing tool is on my scoreboard, buried. What else is new? Okay, so happy with that one. Now we want to make sure that the other gatefold or the other flap is not going to be laying over this flap. So I gotta turn my book this way, and I believe we should be fine. So the only other thing I want to check is the turning of the page, and it looks good too. So we're putting some adhesive on the 1/2-inch tab. We are going to line it up with the bottom of the book and also with the tab or the flap that we already put down. So I have to just maneuver it just ever so slightly. And we want to make sure that the book can still turn, and it can. So now we will burnish. So I'll explain why I didn't round my corners ahead of time, is because I was kind of using this flap to line up this flap, and if I had rounded the corners it would have been harder to make sure everything was straight and square and all that other wonderful fun stuff. So now I'm going to round my corners now. And if my head's in the shot, because it is a little harder, but to me it was worth it considering what I was trying to avoid. And just get rid of all those pieces. And looking good. So now with that little 2 1/4 by 2 1/4, this is what's going to hold the flap shut. And I know it's going to be hard to see this brown on brown. What I decided to do, let me just get this paper out. My closure is actually going to sit this way when I have it finally decorated. So that's how I'm going to try and make sure that I am adhering my magnet so that I keep it in the right position. And we used a large magnet for this purpose, or a large set of magnets, so let's get them out. Like so. And we want to sort of, okay. So I am going to adhere. So we want this magnet to be in the middle of this gatefold. And again, you could use a ribbon closure here. I am choosing to use magnets. Let's put some like so. And then what we want to do is we want to have our magnet like that. So with the adhesive part facing up, remove the backing on that adhesive. And this is where I'm going to take my 2 1/4 by 2 1/4, lining it up, making sure I'm going to be happy, and then pushing down on it. And then let's put a little bit of adhesive on the back. So now once I have my pattern paper on, that's what's going to hold those tiny little flaps shut. Okay, let's move on to that shallow pocket that is going to be at the top of this page, or just above this gatefold. So turn my page again. So I am creating a pocket that measures, move the book, 2 by 7 less a 1/16. So on the 2-inch side, you're going to score it at 1/2. Then you're going to rotate it so the 7.5-inch side is along the top. Score at 1/2. Turn it completely around to the other side. Score at 1/2. So the 7.5 inch is still at the top. Then we are going to burnish score lines. We are going to miter those 1/2-inch tabs. Like so. And fold again. And fold one more time. And then we're going to do some mitering. So we're going to cut through the X to get rid of the bulk. Like so. Okay, let's burnish. And burnish again. Bring the book back in. And what I want to do is I'm basically going to be putting the pocket right above, so I don't want it to impede on the opening. Let's just do that. I don't want it to impede the opening of the flaps, but I do want it right above the flaps or the gatefold. So I'm going to add my adhesive just to the bottom 1/2-inch tab. And then I'm going to put it back down, making sure I keep it to the far right of the base page, because again, we're trying not to impede the folding of the base page. Looking good. I think it's a little too low right there, so we're just going to move it up. There we go. Open. All right. Open it again. And then let's get some tape to run across it. So again, our little tags are, I think they're 6 1/4 by 4 1/4 photo mats. We'll be able to slide in and out without catching on anything. So glue on the 1/2-inch tab to the right, glue on the 1/2-inch tab to the left, folding up, and sew. And I have glue on my fingers, so I'm getting glue every place right now. So burnish and burnish. And I'm pretty sure everything's going to fold according to the plan. Yes, it still does. So give it a little bit more burnishing. Add, oops. There we go. Thought we were going to need to do an adjustment on that. So there is our shallow pocket. And then, like I say, I have 2 photo mats that measure 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. We are going to round those pockets. And they are going to go in like so. Unless you have something that's keeping it from, maybe I've got some glue where I shouldn't have some glue. I think that was what the problem was. Let's try this again. I'm catching, but I won't be catching once I put my pattern paper down. And there are your 2 photo mats that are going in that pocket. So that finishes the front of page 3. Alright, so we're going to move on to the back of page 3 and the front of page 4. And they're going to mirror each other. So the pieces we need for both the back of page 3 and the front of page 4 are, just let me get my paper clip off and my little notes off. We are going to make a pocket that also flips, and there's going to be one on, like I say, the back of page 3 and the front of page 4. Start with the flap. So the flap measures 5 by 7, and on the 5-inch side you are going to score at 1/2 with the 5-inch side along the top. And then for the pocket, they measure 3.5 by 5.5, and with the 3.5-inch side along the top of the scoreboard, you're going to score it at 1/2, and then you're going to rotate and score at 1/2 on the 5.5-inch side, rotate again and score at 1/2. And as I always say, I always like to score on the left-hand side of my scoreboard, because let's say my cut is off a little bit, I'm always going to end up with a true 1/2. So that's just a little bit of information. So let's fold on our score lines. We'll start with the larger, the flap, the 5 by 7 flap, and burnish. And let's do the other one. And we're going to do a little mitering. And I'm going to miter both ends. You could choose only to miter one, and that would be if you can remember which pocket or which flap needs to go on which page. But if I do both, then I don't have to really worry about that. All right. And then the pockets, so let's burnish those score lines again. And then let's work on the pocket, or pockets, because we need 2 of those. So let's fold on the score lines and burnish. Let's do number 2. And the last score line. There we go. So let's do some cutting. We're going to cut right through the X that's at the bottom of the pocket. And just do a slight miter of the 1/2-inch tab at the top. And then you're just going to repeat that on pocket 2. Cutting through the X. Don't cut above that X or you're going to end up with a hole in your pocket. How would I know that? I've done that. There we go. Let's get rid of all these bits. And let's fold and burnish. Let's do that to the second one. Now I'm going to suggest that we add our pocket to our flap before we put the flap in the book. So we want to do a little dry fit. Make sure it's not hanging over on the left or right side. And I would like my pocket to be as far to the right side of my flap. So this is the flap that's going on the back of page 3. So there is a slight difference between these two pockets. So this is the flap that's going on the back side of page 3. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to put a 3 on it. Okay? But the flap that's going on the back of front of page 4, if you look at these flaps, notice how the 1/2-inch tabs are on the opposite side. We want to be adhering our flaps. Let me get the book back in here. So one flap is going to be going down here at the bottom, and the other flap is going to be going up here at the top. So I'm going to put a 4 on it, and that's to remind me where this is supposed to go. So that when I'm putting my pockets down, I'm putting my pockets on the right, if I want to call it the right side, the right end of my flap. Because if I had this number 4 like this, put my pocket here, then I go to want to put it in the book, well, the flap's on the wrong side. So I hope that makes sense. It's just a little point of interest. So you could put your flaps in first, or you can do like I'm going to do and put my flaps in after I have my pockets on them. Okay, so I am going to get out the old adhesive. I'm going to run some adhesive along the bottom tab, and then I just want to make sure I have this down at the bottom but not hanging over, either hanging over on the right hand side or at the bottom. Get my wonderful baby wipe. Just hold it for a second. I should be able to open and burnish. There we go. And then we want just a little bit of tape. And again, this tape is optional. But as I've said, I just find that what doesn't end up happening is I don't catch my mats on that little 1/2-inch tab. Now we're putting it on the 1/2-inch tabs that are on the right and left hand side of the pocket. And then we're going to fold it up, give it a good burnish. And there is one flap with its pocket on it complete. I'm just going to set it aside, and now we're going to work on 4. So remember, this is the front of page 4. So we want this flap to go on the right hand side of page 4. So the tab needs to be on our right hand side when we're creating the pocket. So let's do a little dry fit here to make sure that nothing's going to be hanging over. And it's not. So again, add the adhesive just to the bottom 1/2-inch tab. Looks good. I'm just going to hold it for a second. Burnish. Wipe up any extra glue we might be dealing with. Okay, and again some tape, and I just kind of eyeball it. No exact science to this. And now some adhesive on the 1/2-inch tabs. Second one. Fold up. Okay, I'm going to bring our book back in. Now I also round it just the top corner on my flap. I decided not to round the bottom corner because then you're going to end up with a hole. And there again, that is a choice. So I placed my 2 flaps. One was here at the very bottom, and the other at the back of page 3, and on the front of page 4 I placed it right near the top. Now that again is your choice. No right or wrong. It's what you like to do. So we're going to add our adhesive. And we just want to make sure that we're not hanging over either the bottom of the book, or the page I should say. Trying to see here. Yeah. And then up the side and hold it. Open. Let's get this glue. Burnish. Burnish it well, because that's what keeps the glue. Okay, and then let's do the other side. So again, don't be too crazy with your glue, but be generous. And this one is going to be sitting right at the top of the page. So we just don't want it hanging over the top, and we don't want it hanging over that left-hand side of the back or the front of page 4. I'm just going to hold up my book because that's how I tell. Yes. Get rid of this glue. Open and burnish. Now, I did not put magnets on this page. I believe by the time you have everything in the pockets, it should hold everything in its spot. So we need it. Let's see here. We need it 4 4 1/4 by 6 1/4 inch mats, and we need it 4 3 1/4 by 4 1/4 inch mats. And I am going to round these corners. I'm doing them 2 at a time, because that's the one nice thing about the corner chopper. It can, just making sure that you're keeping everything square as you're doing it. And I know Tammy has these in the store from time to time. So if you haven't ever purchased a corner chopper, she does carry them, and they are an amazing tool to have in your tool bag. So let's do the smaller ones. So these are the 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And let's do the second set of 2. And like so. And there we are. All right, so we are now moving on to the back of page 4. And on the back of page 4, what we have are 2 flaps. One that is going to open from the top and one that's going to open from the bottom. So let's just move the book. So we have a flap that measures 5.5 by 6 1/4. With the 5.5 inch side along the top of the scoreboard, you're going to score at 1/2. And then your second flap measures 5 1/4 by 5 3/4, and with the 5 3/4 along the top, you're going to score at 1/2. So we're going to fold on those score lines. We're going to burnish. I am going to miter the tabs of the, I believe it's 6 1/4. Let me just measure 6 1/4. We don't really need to because it's not hanging over the edge of the page. We're going to round the corners of both flaps. So like so and like so. We are going to adhere the wider flap at the top. And again, if you want to do it in another orientation, that is totally your preference. I'm turning my book upside down so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to add adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab. Centering it side to side. So what you should end up with is about 1/8 of an inch on either side of your flap. I'm just going to stand it up because what I want to do is make sure I've got good coverage. And we're going to do some burnishing. Keep an eye on the glue. And make sure we wipe any up that's and just to sneak out. And then what we want to do is we want to take the flap that is 5 1/4 and center it at the bottom of the page from left to right. So something like that, I think, is what I'm going to be happy with. I did not miter my corners on this flap, or the tabs on my flap, I guess is how I should say it. I'm just going to look again. That's pretty close to what I want. Yes. And burnish. There we go. And the flaps are going to go like this, at least in my book. That's the way they're going to go. Alright, so let's put our magnets down, keeping in mind that we have an attraction going on with the magnet that is way back here on the front of page 3. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this flap, so our top flap, is what we're going to be adhering the other side of this magnet to. So I am going to take the back off the negative or the plus side, and I'm going to put it about here. And then I'm going to remove the magnet. And then we are going to adhere the negative side of this magnet. And again, each set of magnets will be different. And we're going to lay this down. There we go. So what I was trying to explain before is we want to make sure that this magnet is a good thumb's width down, but also that it's that this magnet is not adhering to the one that is over on the back front of page 3, which it's not, because when you do this, their pages aren't wanting to stay together, which, like I say, is my little pet peeve when it comes to magnets and where I place them. All right, so now what we've got left to do is we need to do the front inside of the book and the back inside of the book. And I am going to go back to the front. What's got going on in this front inside cover is we have a flap that is going to open to the left, and on top of that flap, on also the left-hand side, I am putting another pocket or flap that's going to have a pocket on it. So this is the same kind of pocket that we have over here on the back of page 3 and the front of page 4. And it's going to hold some photo mats. So let's do our burnishing and give you some measurements so you know what you need to be cutting. So for the largest flap, it is going to measure 7 by 8.5. And with the 7-inch side along the top of the scoreboard, you are going to score at 1/2. Burnish those score lines. Going to want to miter because they are going from top to bottom. I am going to round my corners. And then I am going to take my next flap that measures 5 by 7, and with the 5-inch side along the top of your scoreboard, you're going to score at 1/2. Because this flap goes right to the bottom, I am going to miter my 1/2-inch tab, and I'm just going to miter it on the top and the bottom. Just makes it easier. And this is going to get adhered to the very front of the first flap we just made a couple of seconds ago. We are only rounding the top corner, like so. Now I'm going to get the pocket ready. What I did is on the 3.5-inch side, I scored at 1/2. And then with the 5.5-inch side along the top, I scored at 1/2 on one end and rotated it and scored at 1/2 again. So let's fold and burnish. And burnish. And burnish. And then we want to do some cutting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut through my X to get rid of the bulk. And then miter the top of those tabs. And then just like we did on the front of page, or the back of page 3 and the front of page 4, I'm going to dry fit this pocket after I burnish it again. So we're just going to double check the fit, make sure it's going to be the way we want it, and it is. So I'm going to adhere this pocket first to the smaller flap. And like I said before, I like to build where I can before I put it in the book, because that just makes it easier. But you can certainly build in the book too. Just need to do what feels right to you. So with some adhesive, some tape, just so our mats are going to slide in nicely. And then I'm going to add my adhesive to the 1/2" tabs. And fold them up, making sure I'm happy with everything, and I am, so give it a good burnish. Wipe away any glue. And then what we're going to do is we're going to adhere. So this is the larger of the two flaps that's going on the left-hand side of the front cover. I am going to adhere the smaller flap right on top and over on the left-hand side. So let's get our adhesive on that 1/2" tab that we already mitered. And then making sure that we are not over. Hold it just for a second at the top and the bottom. Burnish with the baby wipe. And then with your burnishing tool, like so. Bring the book back up. And we are using a large magnet and 2 small magnets. I am going to want a positive and a negative, because that's what's going to hold on our smaller flap. But first we want to attach this small flap to the book, so it's going on the front inside cover. So I'm going to turn the book so that the left-hand side is now closest to me. I want to dry fit this to make sure it's not going to be hanging over at the top or the bottom, and it's not. So let's add some adhesive. Too much there, so we'll just spread it around a little bit with our finger. And then making sure it's not over the edge of the front cover, which it's not. Just hold it in place for a second. And then wipe up any glue. Open it the rest of the way and burnish. And there we go. There's our pocket flap. So there's our smaller flap and our bigger flap. And now we need to put down those magnets I was talking about. And I believe, yes, my magnet went to the back of my book. So I want to find out. So here we go again. There is a magnet here. There's going to be lots of magnets on this page. I want to make sure that these 2 magnets aren't being attracted to each other. So what I want to do is I am going to put my negative down and my positive up, because it's the negative that it's attracting to the magnet that's on this page. Okay, let's do this. Take off the positive. Center it kind of a thumb's width in. And just give me a second. I may have put it right in the middle. No, I did a thumb's width in. So about halfway down from the top and the bottom of this flap, and about a thumb's width in from the left-hand side of the flap. Let's get some score tape. Add my magnet, fold it over, and then put some score tape on top of this one. And then nothing is attracting, which I'm happy about. So now what we want to do, and I guess you might not need the magnets. Let me just look here for a second. No, I want the magnets still because I don't like the way this is flopping around. So I am going to use a set of small magnets. So let's remove the backing. And I am going to put it in, up about a thumb's width, in about a thumb's width. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use that as your guide. And then you're only going to worry up here about how far down you are. And you can eyeball this, something like that. Then I'm going to remove the backing and close it. And I just like the small magnets because it just finishes it off. There's no flap flipping around. Let's put our score tape over top of them. There we go. All right, I'll get rid of those bits. Let's round some corners. So we have two sets of photo mats, two that measure 6 1/4 by 4 1/4, and two that measure 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And I'm just rounding the corners so they can go in the pocket. Making sure that nothing is going to catch or that the pocket's not glued shut. And there's the two smaller ones going in the pocket. Let's move on to the back inside cover. And on the back inside cover, we're going to be making an accordion pocket. And that's a place to put any extra pictures you might have. I am going to make some photo mats for it, but I just thought a nice big pocket in the back of this album might be a good idea because we may have more pictures than we know what to do with. So we have a little bit of cutting to do here. Let's get that all done. Move our main book. We have what I'm calling the accordion pocket flap, and it measures 6 1/2 by 7 less a 1/16. So I just want you to back it up in your trimmer just a little bit. And on the 6 1/2 inch side, I want you to score at 1/2. And that's going to be the flap that's going to come down from the top. And the pocket is going to be made up of a piece of paper that measures, I'm calling this the flap, and it measures 5 1/2 by 7 less a 1/16. And on the 5 1/2 inch side, you're going to score at 1/2. And then we need 2, I'm calling them the accordion strips, and they measure 2 by 5 7/8, and we might have to trim these a little bit to make them a little shorter, but we won't know until we have the accordion pocket put together. So you are going to score on the 2-inch side at 1/2, 1, and 1 1/2. So we're going to burnish all those score lines. And we are going to want to miter. So miter those 1/2-inch tabs. Like so. So the bigger flap is going at the top and the smaller flap is going at the bottom. So let's bring the book back in. No, I told you that wrong. So the accordion pocket flap is the bigger flap. It will be at the bottom. And the flap that is just called the flap will go at the top. So let's adhere both of those into the book. Do a little dry fit to make sure we're going to be happy. And what we're looking for here is we don't want this flap to interfere with the closing and opening of the book, and it does not. So we're going to add some adhesive. Make sure you put the flap as far to the right as you possibly can, holding it in place and wiping up any glue. Like so. We are not going to round these corners because it's the top of the accordion pocket, and if we rounded them we would see our accordion strips that are going to hold our pocket in place. So let's take the smaller flap that measured 5 1/2 by 7 less that 16th, and we are going to be adhering it to the top of the book. So I'm going to turn my book completely around, so now my book is upside down, but it's easier for me to work. Just going to dry fit, looking good. I want to try to close my book. Everything's going to be okay. Just going to do that again because I thought I felt, no, we're going to be good. I thought it was going to impede the closing of the book, but it's not. And we're going to check it again pretty quick, so if we've got a problem we will have time to correct it. Alright, so it's going to go as far, right now it's the left hand side, but if the book was facing the right way it would be as far to the right. And you can also use your flap or that accordion, the bottom flap that you've already put down. I need to just adjust this. There we go. Excellent. Burnish. And again, we want to check to make sure nothing's in the way. We also want to check that when the book is closed, no, I'm not liking this. I could feel something binding, so I want to lift this off quickly. All is good. I want to close my book again. So what was happening is I was feeling a little bit of binding when I closed the book. So I am going to take my top flap and I'm just going to go cut just a little sliver off of it to correct that. Just going to remiter that corner. And I'm going to dry fit again, turning my book around so now it's upside down again. And just going to double check everything. And that's what I like about the Artisan. As long as you do it right away, you can take things out. Okay, so we're going to get some adhesive on here. So keep it as far to the right as you can. So the book is now facing the right way. I will turn it around here in a second. There we go. So turn it around. Yeah, it looks good. Wipe up any glue. And again, close it up, making sure we can close our book. And I am going to, hang on a second here. I was about to say I'm going to be happy, and then just give me a second. Yes, I will be happy. And it's better to catch these things now than to be catching them once you've got the pattern paper down, because then you're going to have to go right back and tear out paper, use new pattern paper. It's a big pain. So just going to hold those corners just for a second. I think I'm happy. Now we're going to round some corners. And the reason I didn't round them before I put the flap in the book is it's easier to make sure I'm even along the sides if my corners are not rounded. And when you round the corners, if it was off by a little bit, it will camouflage it. You know, I emptied my chomper before I started, and it's full already. But that's how it goes. Okay, we need to put our piece of pattern paper down that is going to be at the top of the inside of the pocket. I've chosen this larger flower print. It really is not one of my favorites, so I'm thinking it's a good place to put it where you're not going to see it. And the reason we want to lay down this piece of pattern paper first is because when we make our accordion pocket, we won't be able to get in there with this piece of pattern paper and have edge-to-edge coverage. So we're going to do this now. And I always cut my pattern paper 1/8 of an inch smaller than the area I want to cover. So in this case, I cut this piece of pattern paper at 6 7/8 because the book is 7 inches wide, and I only want it to go down about 3.5 inches. I just want it to go down far enough that I'm not going to see the edge. You don't need to go right to the bottom. There's no reason to, and it's a waste of paper. So I've inked my edges. So I'm going to put my adhesive on it. So you will need to decide what you want to put there. And making sure that the pattern paper is not going to cause a problem with opening and closing the book. I can tell by just looking that I'm okay. Yes, we are just fine. So let's work on our 2 strips that we need to make. The accordion strips, I already gave you the measurements and the scoring. So they were 2, and you scored 2 by 5 7/8, and you scored on the 2-inch side at 1/2, 1, 1 1/2. So the first thing I've done is I folded it in half, and then I'm going to fold it towards itself. I'm going to turn it around and do the same thing. I'm folding it. Actually, I want to fold it this way. So I'll show you what I've done here. Just let me burnish these. I folded it in half, and then I folded the 1/2-inch strips back on themselves. So when you look at it, so when you have it facing you, you should be able to form an M. That's how I remember what it is I want to do. So we're going to repeat that for the second one. So I'm folding it right in the middle. I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to fold on one side back on itself. Turning it the other way. And then folding it together. And then when I look at it, I've created an M. Bring the book back in, because we're going to want to dry fit these. I want to make sure that one is on the left-hand side and one goes on the right-hand side. The first thing we're dry fitting for is the height. Making sure that the height is going to be okay. It is on that side. I want to repeat over on the right-hand side. And again, it is. I want my raw edges of these accordion strips to be facing into each other. So the nice folded edges are going out, but the raw edges, the top and bottom raw edge, are on, for this right-hand accordion strip, it's on the left-hand side. And for the one that's over here on the left-hand side, these are your finished edges, and your 2 raw edges are on the right-hand side. We're going to turn our book. We're going to add some adhesive. I don't miter these. Some people do. I choose not to. No, we are going to do a quick turnaround. I am actually going to attach it. Oh, I'm right. I'm going to attach it to my cover or my flap first. So I'm just going to need to hold my book up somehow. Making sure I've got a flat surface, and I'm going to want my white paper underneath this because for sure I'm not going to be able to see. So we want to attach it to the top. Actually, no, to the fold. Making sure it's not hanging over. There we go. And we can check that. It's hanging over down here. Looking good. Burnish. Now we want to go over to the, so put the book right back in the right orientation. We want to go to the left-hand side, so we're using the left-hand side of that flap. And we are going to repeat the same process. So we have our finished edges of our accordion strip to the left. The raw edges are to the right. We are going to add adhesive, keeping it closer to the bottom. You can miter these strips if you would like to. I choose not to. Don't really believe it makes that much difference. So just make sure you kind of hold it up, making sure nothing is hanging over, which it's not. Burnish. And then what's going to happen is we are going to add adhesive to this raw edge of the accordion strip and then fold it up, making sure we keep everything tucked in and adhere it to the back inside cover. So kind of going to do this all at the same time. So I'm going to add some adhesive to this side. Then we're going to repeat over here and add some adhesive. There we go. Pinch them in at the bottom, so you could have used some glue to do that. Since I don't mind getting glue all over my fingers, I'm okay to do it as I lay it down. And then make sure that both sides are secured. Give a little burnish, and then what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can close our book, which we can. So now we can give it a very good burnish. Make sure to go just straight up and down along that adhesive strip or that accordion strip. If there's any glue, this is the time to wipe it up. Baby wipe. There's just a little glue there. You can take your burnishing tool, and I'm probably going to work with one of my, as I call them, my very expensive crafting tools. Just run it down to the bottom, making sure that there's no glue on both sides. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Then make sure the strips are folding the way you want them. And then the flap that goes over the top of the pocket will come down like that. And we are going to be putting in this flap, or on this flap, a set of 2 small magnets. So what we need to think about is we have a large magnet in the middle of this back page. We have nothing over here, nothing over there. So I know that I can add my 2 small magnets to the inside of this pocket, and they are going to adhere where I want them to. Or I can do it from the top flap, which I think is the way I'm going to do it today. I'm going to turn my book completely around, like so. So again, I use that thumb width, and it's probably a good inch. That would be if you need a more accurate measurement to work for. And I'm not going to worry about it. So when you have a magnet that's not cooperating like this one is, you just add some adhesive to the other side of it. Your finger will let go of it. And we are going to add some adhesive to the back of this magnet. So it's going to stick where I want it to. Then carefully bring them down. It only works if you take the backing off of it. I got little magnets every place here now. There we go. And that's what we were looking for. But I had a magnet that wasn't cooperating. So I just let it flip over and used it the way it wanted to be. Adhesive. Keep our magnets in place. Turn the book back around. So there's your big accordion pocket in the back. And we have two mats that measure 5 1/4 by 7 1/4. And then we have two that measure 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And lots of room for more mats, more pictures. So let's just clean this up a little bit. Move my white piece of paper. And we have finished the construction of our Ancestry album. So it opens. There is a small flap on a larger flap on the inside front cover. Then there is a flap on front of page 1 that opens to the left and to the right. The back of page 1 is a zigzag flap that folds out from the left-hand side. On the front of page 2 are two flaps that go to the right. The back of page 2 is a flap that lifts up with a pocket with some photo mats in it. There is a shallow pocket on the top of the front of page 3 and a small gatefold at the bottom of page 3. On the back of page 3 and the front of page 4 are two flaps. One flips to the right, one flips to the left, and then there's a pocket on the top of it with photo mats in it. The back of page 4 is just a flap that flips up and a flap that flips down. And then again there is a large accordion pocket on the back page, or the back inside cover, with photo mats inside it. So I will come back with a walkthrough after I've decorated it, and I will link that in the description box below. Can't wait to see what you create, and we will see you in the next video.